Suppose a world opens up before you, where every action and every decision affects the future course of events. At the center of this story is a family on the cusp of great change. Sometimes we have to face situations that pose difficult questions, and we have to make decisions that can change our life path. In this context, the characters begin to realize how important it is to consider not only their own desires, but also the needs of others who make up their immediate environment. What would you do if you found yourself in a situation where your usual views on life, relationships, and choices would undergo a major change? How do you maintain inner harmony without losing critical connections with those you care about, despite external challenges and pressures of the reality around you? A story about how challenging life moments help you realize what really matters and how to find a way out of seemingly impossible situations. The main character, Dan Morgan, is a man with a dark past. He was a professional hitman in the past, but now tries to live a peaceful life. Working as a car salesman, he enjoys a quiet family life with his wife Jessica Morgan and 3 children, Nina, Kyle, and Max. He has distanced himself from his past life, no longer wanting to be involved in violence, and seeks to provide his family with security and stability. His motivation is to put his past behind him and build a better future for his loved ones. Jessica Morgan, his wife, although she loves her family, feels that their lives are too boring and predictable. She longs for more adventure and spontaneity, dreaming of colorful and memorable moments. This contrast between her and her husband becomes apparent when they decide to go on a spontaneous trip. She hopes it will give her life a new impetus. Nina Morgan, the eldest daughter who is on the cusp of a major milestone in her life, is trying to find her identity. She dreams of going to Stanford but soon faces the reality that her boyfriend, who she thought was her rock, is cheating on her. This becomes a turning point for her that forces her to reevaluate her life priorities and goals. Kyle Morgan, the middle son, is also going through his own phase of growing up. Leading an active life in the online space as a popular gamer and streamer, he is forced to confront how his father and family are beginning to influence his perception of the world. He is motivated to find his own path while trying to find a balance between virtual reality and real life. Max Morgan, the youngest son, does not realize the full danger of the situation, but his presence at the center of events becomes a symbol that sometimes children are caught up in the storm created by adult decisions. He is the part of the family for which Dan is willing to make any sacrifice. The plot develops in 2 key locations: the suburbs of Buffalo, where the Morgan family leads their quiet and ordinary lives, and on the roads of America, as they embark on a spontaneous journey that drastically changes their daily routine. The environment in Buffalo is a place where everything seems to be predictable and calm, as if you live in your own little world, away from the big problems. Dan enjoys the quiet. He sees himself as part of this secluded, almost perfect life. But despite the outward harmony, he realizes that his past will catch up with him sooner or later. The adventure begins as the family sets off and things become less predictable. As they move along the road, the atmosphere changes as well. The transition from the quiet suburbs to the more dynamic, intense events on the highway emphasizes the changes taking place in each character's life. Auggie, an old acquaintance of Dan's, also plays a key role in the development of the plot. He is the link between Dan's past and his present. Auggie helps the hero figure out what is really going on and how to escape the threat that is stalking his family. Despite her connection to the world of violence, Auggie doesn't always support Dan's methods, and this creates some tension between the two. McAffrey, Dan's former boss, becomes the main antagonist. He is a man who is unwilling to let go of his former subordinates and is always keeping an eye on them. His presence in the movie expresses the danger that hangs over the main characters, even as they try to get rid of old problems. He embodies the threat that becomes real when Dan and his family are drawn into a game they cannot give up. When Dan decides to reveal his true identity to his family, the consequences are more complicated than he could have imagined. It all starts when, during their trip to Las Vegas, Dan decides to tell Jessica about his past when he worked as a hitman. He planned to come clean, hoping for understanding and forgiveness, but didn't consider how serious the repercussions would be for their family. However, even though she is shocked, Jessica tries to understand what led Dan to make these decisions. He explains that his former life was dangerous and violent, and he has long wanted to get away from that, to start a new life to keep his family safe. But now that his past has come to light, they are forced to face reality. Everything they dreamed of, a quiet life in the suburbs, has been jeopardized. As time passes, the situation becomes even more tense. Jessica begins to question the rightness of their decision to stay with Dan. She fears that their family will no longer be safe and that her husband will once again be at the center of dangerous events that could put their lives at risk. She begins to look for a way to leave with the children, hoping that by leaving him they can avoid further problems. Dan, however, does not give up. He decides that he will protect his family at all costs and finds ways to neutralize the threats. This moment becomes a turning point for their relationship. Jessica feels that her husband is no longer the same person she started to build her life with. He has become different, and her feelings towards him are changing. She cannot forgive him for lying to her, but at the same time she realizes that now she and the children have also become part of this dangerous world, from which it is impossible to escape. When Dan and his family find themselves in Las Vegas, events begin to unfold rapidly, changing not only their lives, but also how they perceive each other. After Dan reveals his true identity to Jessica, their relationship begins to crack at the seams. This confession becomes not only a blow to Jessica, but also to the entire family. She, in turn, realizes that their former life, quiet and ordinary, can no longer be restored. They find themselves at the center of a multi-layered conflict that will only escalate. Amidst these emotional storms, their journey continues to unfold. During their stay in Las Vegas, where Dan wanted to eventually uncover the truth and start a new life, it becomes clear that things are much more complicated. While Dan hopes that Jessica will understand him and make the decision to move on, the reality proves to be much crueler. Instead of being relieved, the family faces an even greater threat when it turns out that all their attempts to escape their past are doomed to failure. As soon as they arrive in Las Vegas, a series of dangerous events begin that shatters their hopes for a normal life. Dan soon realizes that not only is he being stalked by assassins, but his past cannot be erased. He discovers that his former boss, McAffrey, is not only stalking him, but is looking for a way to bring Dan back into his underworld by threatening him and his family. With no time to adjust to this new turn of events, the family is forced to face relentless attacks that stretch throughout their journey. When Dan and Jessica decide it's time to finally tell their children the truth about his past, they are already being stalked by assassins. This becomes the culmination of their escalating relationship, as Jessica and the kids now find themselves at the center of the most dangerous confrontation of their lives. But the most unexpected thing happens when, at the most critical moment, after they have survived another attack on their lives, Dan begins to see his family becoming increasingly estranged from him. They don't understand why he can't just walk away from his past and choose a safer path. Jessica at this point feels betrayed and disappointed. She can't accept that her husband is reverting back to violence, even if he is doing it for their safety. The conflict between them reaches a climax when Jessica decides that she and the children must leave. She cannot continue to be there for Dan, knowing that their lives will no longer be peaceful. At this point, she begins to realize that their family will never be the same again. Even with all the love and affection they had, reality is cruel. Dan and his past won't allow them to be the people they used to be again. It's not an easy step for her, but Jessica decides that for the safety of the children and herself, they need to be as far away from this dangerous life as possible. Now, on day 3, Dan, realizing that his family may be gone, decides to do whatever it takes to protect them. He begins to actively fight the threats, which become even more dangerous when they intersect with the past. This moment becomes crucial for himself. He realizes that he can't leave his family behind, but he can't go back to his old life either. He decides to take full responsibility for their safety, despite the risks. With each new step in this conflict, their relationship undergoes an even greater change. Everyone in the family begins to realize that this is the moment of truth for them. If they want to be together, they must learn to adapt to a whole new reality, full of danger, betrayals, and decisions that could cost them their lives. This moment becomes the catalyst for the rest of the story, when each of them must decide what is more important, staying together or starting a new life alone. When Dan and his family find themselves at the center of danger, not everything in their lives is reduced to external threats. Internal conflict begins to have an even greater impact on each of them. Dan realizes that his decisions, despite his best efforts, are beginning to destroy not only his life, but the lives of his loved ones as well. The threat from his past becomes not just physical, but emotional as well, making their struggle to stay safe even more difficult. Look at that. After Dan decides to tell his family the whole truth about his past, his relationship with Jessica and the children becomes strained. Jessica feels betrayed, and this leads to deep emotional trauma. She can't believe that her husband, with whom she has built a peaceful life, has been a hidden participant in dangerous situations for so long. This revelation causes her to question their entire relationship, forcing her to make a decision that could destroy their family. Dan, for his part, realizes that his desire to protect his family may not be enough to regain their trust. He is faced with the fact that his past and violent principles can no longer be part of his new image. This realization leads him to try to cut ties with those who represent his dark past and find a way to protect his family, even if it leads to more sacrifices. Jacquard. Dan and Jessica's emotional struggle becomes the main driving force in the movie. Dan tries to find a compromise between his desire to protect his loved ones and the need to stop being a part of violence and crime. But at the same time, he realizes that all his attempts to simply disappear will not produce the desired results, and he must decide what is more important to him: returning to the world he has spent so many years trying to part with, or finding a way to survive and protect his family despite the risks. When Jessica and the children decide to leave Dan and try to return to a normal life, it further complicates the internal tension he is experiencing. He realizes that he can't force them to be a part of his problems, but at the same time, he can't let them leave, knowing that they will be in danger. This state of internal struggle reinforces the entire film, emphasizing how difficult it can be to choose between personal safety and love for loved ones. Amidst the external threats that Dan and his family face, there are changes in their relationship. Through confrontations and dramatic events, each family member must redefine what is more important to them: staying true to themselves and their feelings, or making sacrifices for survival. This process becomes a lesson for each of them that not only changes their perception of the world, but also forces them to make difficult decisions about what path they are willing to take to preserve their lives and family. What would you do if you were in Dan's shoes? If your past, from which you were trying to escape, suddenly burst into your life and jeopardized the safety of your family, what would you do? Would you be able to find a way to deal with that threat without losing yourself in the process? Family ties are not just a relationship, they are also a responsibility. Do you think it is possible to stay true to yourself and your loved ones, even when life forces you to choose between love and survival? And what sacrifices are people willing to make to protect their loved ones when their safety is threatened? Dan faces a dilemma. How far is he willing to go for his family? Is it worth risking everything to protect those you love? Or at some point must you recognize that rescue requires tough decisions that could destroy what you've tried to preserve? When Dan's family decides to leave him, returning to a more peaceful life, it seems as if his world is crumbling. But is that what true freedom is all about? What's more important, being there for those you love, or giving them a chance at a normal future without fear and violence? And is it even possible to return to normal life if you have already overstepped your own principles? When Dan's family decides to leave him and return to a calmer life, it seems like his world is falling apart. But is this really what freedom is about? What's more important, staying close to those you love, or giving them a chance at a normal future without fear and violence? And is there even a possibility of returning to a normal life once you've crossed the line of your own principles? What do you think? Can you truly escape your past if it keeps chasing you? What could be stronger than the instinct for self-preservation and the desire to be with those who are dear to you?